Macronutrients are a common way that we look at food and figure out what we should be eating in a day. If you're new to macronutrients, this video is for you, and I'd love to dive in to help you understand what they are, how to track, how to come up with your own macronutrients, and ways that you can go about living a healthy lifestyle while also keeping in mind your fitness goals and overall well-being. I've tracked macros for approximately 6 years now, and it's taken me quite a bit of time to get used to understanding them and using my own learning to try different foods, experiment with different recipes, and also understand what macronutrients really are and how they play a role in my day-to-day eating. So at a base level, what are macronutrients? Macronutrients are the three main types of calories that you're getting from your food. We have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Each one is a different level of calories for 1 gram that is eaten. Carbohydrates and our proteins are both 4 calories per gram. Our fats, however, are 9 calories per gram. So when we are tracking and starting to understand what different macros make up different foods, we are able to then multiply them to figure out what it is we are eating and how much calories we're getting in from a certain food. So it gets a little bit more complex when we're eating foods that have proteins, carbs, and fats. That's where starting with basic foods and individual ingredients is going to help you in the long run, so that when you are eating out or cooking your own recipe, you can guesstimate and also weigh out the different foods to understand what calories those foods are made up of. A lot of different dieting focus on just calories alone, but I have found over the years that a lot of times women are undereating or overeating certain macronutrients. Specifically, we undereat protein, and a lot of times we're overeating fats or carbs depending on our body's metabolism and overall our body composition. So why does this matter, and is tracking right for you? At the end of the day, if you are just getting started with your health and fitness journey, I want you to be equipped with the information that you feel confident tracking the food that you eat, understanding what that food is broken down into, so that when you actually eat it, you know what you're putting into your body. That's actually one of the reasons I advocate people meal prep their own food 90 to 95% of the time, because then you actually know what you are taking in versus even some of the processed food. The scales can be off, the nutrition labels could be incorrect. That is something that we can do a whole nother video on, is how to read a nutrition label and help you understand what you see on the back of a box or the back of a bag, and being able to figure out what you need when you're eating that food as well. So what should your macronutrients be? Every single person is different, and I always emphasize bioindividuality. So if you follow me, you know that's like my bread and butter, is every single person is not going to have the same macros. You're not going to have the same diet. We're going to customize everything to you, your health, and your goals. When we're looking at a standard nutrition plan, most people, and I'm generalizing, are going to be doing 40% of their calories with protein, 40% of their calories with carbohydrates, and 20% of their calories with fats. Now, if you are someone that has metabolic dysfunction, you may not be increasing your protein that high. You also might need to adjust your carbs and your fats accordingly. We also want to take into consideration, if someone has not trained before, they will not need quite as much protein as someone who is used to weight training and being an athlete. A lot of people that follow me in this channel are athletes or have experience in some type of competitive athlete sport background. The recommended dietary intake for protein is 0.8 to 1.2 kilograms per body weight. Once again, this is going to be bioindividual, because if you are someone who is trying to build more muscle and you are a leaner ectomorphic physique structure, you might need more protein in order to actually put on that lean muscle tissue. However, if you're someone who has a higher body mass index or BMI, on the overweight side, maybe you have cholesterol, insulin resistance issues, we might not be able to push your protein that high because your body is not going to digest it quite as well. So we just need to be mindful of every single person being different in that situation. The lowest that I would typically go for a female is 20% of her calories being from proteins. But once again, we haven't even talked about, are you in a maintenance phase, a deficit, or a caloric surplus? And when it comes to tracking your macros, you will be adjusting that if you have a low carb day or if you are going into a deficit or a maintenance. So making sure that you are being diligent and consistent is going to pay off in the long run. So what do you really need to track your macros? In my mind, it's just two things: a working food scale and an app. I've had a food scale for a couple of years and used a few different ones. This one I like right now is from Amazon, and in my links you can check it out. It charges with a cord cable, and I actually get probably 2 to 3 weeks of battery off of it without having to charge it. So I really like that you can choose if you want to measure in grams, ounces, even if it's a fluid, you can do milliliters, which is really handy. What we're doing is we are going to measure the actual ingredients using the food scale, and then you go into an app and you are going to track what the weight of the food is that you're going to eat, and it's going to tell you how many calories or how many of each macros that is. So some of my favorite apps are MyFitnessPal, My Macros Plus, and Chronometer. Each of them have a free version as well as a paid version. I purchased the My Macros Plus, and I've used that for several years now. And ultimately, one of my favorite reasons to purchase an app is not just because you get added tracking of like your water, your body weight, some different metrics that maybe you want to keep in one place, but I also can track my recipes. So a common question I get is, how do you figure out what are the macros in a large recipe you're cooking at home? Maybe you're cooking for your family, or you are at a family event and you want to figure out how much of this serving you are eating, what is the calories of it? Maybe you make a batch of cookies and you want to figure out how many calories or how much of each macros is in one of those amazing cookies that you made. This is where tracking in bulk will be super duper helpful. So I'm going to show you in this app that you can go in and you plug in each individual ingredient from the main recipe. So in this example, I'm showing you one of my cookie recipes. I put every single ingredient in the total amount used for this recipe, and I then will change what the serving amount is. So if your batch of cookies is 9 cookies or 12 cookies, 24 cookies, you can change that number and you click save, and then it will show you, if you scroll down, how much each individual serving will be. This is the same way if you're doing like a casserole, or maybe you make an egg bake in the morning and you want to figure out what those individual macronutrients are. You are literally just inputting all of the data in one place and it will do the math for you, which is super handy. I get asked this a lot by newer food trackers. How do you choose which macros go in which meal? This is where you're starting to learn your body, starting to learn what foods digest well, what you like, what meals you like paired together. I'm a big advocate of pairing proteins with carbs and fats, proteins with just fats and vegetables, proteins with carbs on their own. Even if someone has like a really balanced macros plan, you can do proteins, carbs, and fats with every single meal. It's not a big deal, especially at the beginner level. Where it gets more complex and advanced is when you have someone who is maybe a competition athlete, is really trying to tailor in their physique to a certain look. You will want to adjust your carbohydrate intake, maybe some of your protein and fat intake based on your training, and putting what we call a peri-window of nutrients around when you weight train. I'm a big advocate on not doing fasted training unless you're trying to lose muscle mass, which most people should not be trying to lose muscle mass because we know the benefits of carrying muscle for our metabolism and our overall health. But when we surround our workouts with proteins, carbs, and fats, especially pre-workout, we're going to have enough nutrients during our training session to help us with stable blood sugar levels as well as that glucose spike to go into the muscles you're working. Post-training, what's most important? Proteins and carbohydrates. Fueling those muscles you just trained so that you can recover faster, and making sure that you are keeping your protein level through the day to enhance your muscle protein synthesis. Once again, this is more of the advanced athlete route, and you're really trying to dial in a physique that you've been training for several years, not necessarily someone who's just trying to lose body fat and weight. Another thing to keep in mind is eating windows. I am a big advocate on meal timing and eating windows. Usually I recommend people eating a meal every 3 to 4 hours, but you also want to give your body a break through the day. So an eating window could be upon wake up at 7 a.m. and then by 7 p.m. that's your last meal of the day. So it's a 12-hour eating window, and then from 7 p.m. through the night when you sleep until you wake up at 7 a.m. the next day, that is your fast. And that is where your body and your digestive system can rest and repair. So once again, each meal you're splitting through the day. If you're doing every 3 hours, you might do, 4 or 5 meals in a day. Snacks, I still consider a meal, and you're counting your macros accordingly. How do you track when you're traveling? Once again, the more you become friends with your tracking app, the easier it's going to be. I forgot to mention they do have a barcode scanner, so that is really convenient when you don't want to manually input a food, but you can just scan the barcode and it pulls it up for you. Now, keep in mind, some of them are inaccurate at first and you have to go in and edit, but after that, you should be good to go, tracking out the grams of what those foods are. If you are maybe going to a grocery store, or you're going to a fast food restaurant or a gas station, and you're picking up something to eat, it can be a little bit more challenging. But this is where there's a balance of intuitive eating versus macros tracking. The more you learn different foods and what makes up those foods, the easier it's going to be when you're eating out or you're traveling or on vacation to pick foods that fit your health needs and your plan. Sometimes we don't have a lot of options. I will say in today's age, with a lot of dietary restrictions, allergies, there's more awareness around food selection and food options, so that is really helpful. In rural areas, it is a little bit more difficult, especially at these mom and pop restaurants, but it's not impossible. When in doubt, find a lean protein and vegetables. We can always get carbs and fats. That's the biggest thing for me, is you can always find carbs and fats in food. Even if you're just getting whole eggs that are already hard boiled, then you can track those right away and you know that you're gonna have proteins and fats from those eggs. Now, if you're getting something at like a diner and they're cooking up 2 fried eggs, odds are they're gonna use oil or butter. So you're going to want to account for maybe a little bit of extra oil in your macros for that meal specifically. But once again, a lot of it comes from experience and awareness of what goes into making food and cooking food. And as you start to cook your own foods, you're going to learn that awareness as well. So at the end of the day, what makes the most sense for you when it comes to having macros, tracking macros, or doing intuitive eating? I think a lot of people, including myself, have gone through experience of very regimented macro tracking to cutting ties with macros altogether and doing only intuitive eating. And that's okay, because at some point, you know what amounts of food you need to eat to get certain macros. It's funny because sometimes I won't even scale out my protein. I'll eyeball it and it'll be 4 ounces of chicken or turkey, because I'm so used to grabbing that same amount every single day. That consistency builds up over time. Your body, your mind, your hands, you get used to it. So it's not necessarily something that's going to be too difficult in the long run as you continue to build and strengthen that muscle. Just like weight training, the more you use it, the easier it becomes. I will say one of the biggest challenges women have is under eating protein. We know that building muscle and having protein in our diet helps with not only our brain and our muscles, but overall our metabolism. And from a longevity standpoint, eating protein is going to benefit us for our overall health. So if we can start figuring out lean protein sources that are easy to get in our day-to-day life, most of them are going to be animal-based. There are very few plant-based that have enough of the amino acid profiles that we need for L-leucine production, which is our most important amino acid. But that again is something that just takes practice. And I don't know if it's just women afraid that they're going to get bulky from eating protein, or it's going to make them bloat, or whatever it might be. Protein is not bad for us. We just need to figure out what that balance is and start tracking to understand how much we actually need, and being aware if we are under eating or overeating it.